The Interstellar Peace Academy hung suspended among the stars, its gleaming spires and interconnected domes visible from two systems away. Built in the aftermath of the Fourth Interspecies War, it served as both symbol and practical implementation of the Galactic Alliance's commitment to unity. Within its walls, the brightest young minds from across known space trained together to forge bonds that transcended species and prevent the mistakes of the past. Among them was Amare Fletcher, 16 standard cycles old, and the only human from Cantria enrolled that year. "You must be joking," said Kalen Thriss, his translucent Zorinthian skin pulsing with blue light patterns that signaled disbelief. They allowed a Deathworlder into the elite strategic course. Amare pretended not to hear as she arranged her study materials on the hover desk. She was used to this reaction, had been preparing for it since the day her application was accepted. Her small frame and delicate features always provoked the same response: underestimation, followed by unease once they learned where she was from. Cantria was classified as a Class 9 death world, a planet so hostile that most galactic species would perish within hours of arrival. Atmospheric pressure at 1.8 standard, gravity at 1.65 g, temperature fluctuations of 40 degrees within a single-day cycle, indigenous predators that could dissolve metal. The list of deadly features went on. That humans not only survived there but built thriving colonies was a source of both fascination and fear throughout the Alliance. "I've reviewed her file," said Unit 73, its biologically integrated learning core whirring softly. The robot's design mimicked the joined consciousness of the Quantan race, with a silver-blue frame housing organic neural matter. The Fletcher specimen meets all Academy requirements. Her theoretical scores are within acceptable parameters. "Theoretical," growled Vaurak, the young Volcran warrior whose crimson scales bristled whenever he spoke. "Theory means nothing when real blood is spilled." Amare finally looked up, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "I believe class begins in 3 minutes. Perhaps we should focus on preparation rather than my planet of origin." Her voice was soft but firm, betraying none of the anxiety that twisted in her stomach. She'd fought too hard to get here, survived too much, to let their prejudice derail her. The classroom filled quickly with students representing 23 species from across the Alliance. Commander Gellius, a veteran of 3 interspecies conflicts, strode to the central platform. The 4 eyes characteristic of his Novalian heritage swept across the assembled students, seeming to catalog their strengths and weaknesses with clinical precision. "Welcome to Advanced Tactical Survival," he began, his translator rendering his high-pitched native speech into standard galactic. "This class separates future leaders from future casualties. Today, you begin practical assessment." Amare felt a familiar tension build in her muscles. On Cantria, practical assessment often meant the difference between life and death. Her parents had enrolled her in survival training when she was 4 years old, standard practice for Cantrian children. By 8, she could identify every poisonous plant species in her region, set broken bones, and outrun most local predators. By 12, she had survived her first solo week in the Raging Plains, the most dangerous region on an already dangerous planet. The commander continued, "You will be organized into random teams of 4 for the interspecies survival test. Each team must navigate a combat simulation against an autonomous warbot. Your objective: disable the unit without casualties." Holographic displays appeared above each desk, assigning students to their teams. Amare's heart sank as she saw her 3 teammates, Kalen Thriss, Unit 73, and Vaurak. Of all the possible combinations, she'd been assigned to the 3 who had just openly questioned her presence. "Team 7, Commander Gellius called out. "Your simulation begins in 1 hour. Prepare accordingly." Kalen immediately took charge, his aristocratic Zorinthian heritage evident in his commanding tone. Unit 73, you're our tech specialist. Analyze warbot weaknesses. Valrak, you'll lead the frontal assault. I'll coordinate from tactical position. He barely glanced at Amare. Fletcher, stay back and observe. Provide moral support. Amare felt her jaw tighten. I have combat experience. On Cantria. This isn't your death world, Kalen interrupted. This is sophisticated technology, not wrestling with primitive beasts. Know your place. She could have argued, could have mentioned the dozens of automated defense systems she'd disabled during her training. Instead, she nodded. As you wish. Growing up on Cantria had taught her when to fight and when to wait. Sometimes, showing was more effective than telling. The simulation chamber was a massive dome capable of generating any terrain or combat scenario. Today, it had formed into an abandoned space station, dimly lit corridors, malfunctioning doors, and the constant hiss of escaping atmosphere. Warbot will activate in 30 seconds, announced the automated system. Objective: disable central control unit. Simulated injuries will be registered through your tactical suits. The warbot emerged from a hidden compartment, 3 meters tall, armored with reactive plating, and equipped with multiple offensive systems. It wasn't the largest model in the Alliance arsenal, but it was designed to engage multiple opponents simultaneously. Executing Plan Alpha, Kalen transmitted through their team comm. Valrak, engage. Unit 73, circle left and identify weak points. The Volcron warrior charged forward, his natural armor and superior strength making him the logical choice for direct combat. Yet the warbot's tactical AI anticipated this approach, pivoting to engage while deploying countermeasures against Unit 73's scanning attempts. Amare watched, analyzing both the robot's movements and her team's tactics. 3 fundamental flaws were immediately apparent. They were fighting according to their individual species' strategies, rather than adapting. They had underestimated the warbot's adaptive learning capability, and they had positioned themselves without considering structural vulnerabilities in the station setting. Within minutes, the simulation was going poorly. Valrak had sustained multiple injuries to his primary limbs. Unit 73's sensors were partially disabled by counter-electronic measures, and Kalen's tactical position had been compromised when the robot deployed smoke grenades. Recalculating approach, Kalen transmitted, his voice strained. Unit 73, divert power to defensive systems. Valrak, fall back and... A sudden crash interrupted him as a section of ceiling collapsed, separating Amare from the rest of the team. The warbot, registering the tactical advantage, moved to trap the 3 behind the debris while positioning itself between them and the exit. Amare found herself alone, facing the warbot's back. The machine was focused on her teammates, its sensors scanning for ways to incapacitate them through the rubble. She had seconds to make a decision. Training from Cantria took over. In one fluid motion, she removed her heavy academy boots, designed for standard gravity. They only slowed her down. Her bare feet gave her better tactile connection to the floor, something Cantrians learned early. She felt, rather than heard, the warbot's movement patterns through vibrations in the metal plating. "Fletcher, stay back!" Kalen's voice crackled through the comm. Amare didn't respond. She was already moving, darting forward in a low sprint that kept her beneath the warbot's primary sensor array. Cantrian muscles, developed under crushing gravity, propelled her with unexpected speed. The robot detected her approach too late. As it began to pivot, Amare was already sliding between its legs, identifying the maintenance access panel on its lower back, standard Alliance design, reinforced but with predictable attachment points. On Cantria, children learned to identify load-bearing structures instinctively. In a world where stone shelves could collapse under their own weight, where natural bridges might give way during seasonal temperature changes, this knowledge meant survival. Amare jammed her fingers into the seam of the access panel, feeling the synthetic skin on her fingertips tear against the metal. Pain was irrelevant. She pulled, leveraging her body weight and the robot's own momentum as it turned. The panel gave way with a shriek of tearing metal. "What are you doing?" Vaurak shouted through the comm. "Get away from it!" The warbot's systems registered the breach, and it began emergency protocols to neutralize the threat. But Amare was already moving again, this time upward, climbing the machine's frame with practiced efficiency. Her hands found purchase on components never designed to be gripped by human fingers. The robot spun, trying to dislodge her, deploying countermeasures that singed her uniform and left angry red marks on her exposed skin. She ignored the pain, focusing instead on the central processing unit, now visible through the opened panel. One problem remained. The protective casing around the CPU was designed to withstand conventional weapons. Even if she had been armed, standard tactics wouldn't work. But Amare wasn't using standard tactics. Instead, she braced herself against the warbot's shoulder assembly, muscles tensing as she gathered strength born from a lifetime on a world that constantly tried to kill her. With a single, explosive movement, she drove her fist directly into the processor housing. The impact should have broken her hand. Instead, the reinforced casing cracked. Alarms blared as the warbot systems registered critical damage. It deployed final defensive protocols, electric current surging through its external frame to disable any organic attackers. Amare felt the shock course through her body, muscles spasming painfully. But Cantrian physiology had evolved to withstand electrical storms that would kill most galactic species. She gritted her teeth and maintained her grip. With the last of her strength, she reached into the damaged housing and grasped the primary control module. One sharp twist, and the connection severed. The warbot froze mid-motion, its systems shutting down. For one silent moment, Amare clung to the deactivated machine, breathing heavily as her body processed the exertion and injuries. Then, in a display that would later become Academy legend, she pushed herself upright atop the robot's shoulders. Standing 3 meters above the ground on the defeated warbot, illuminated by emergency lighting, she looked down at her stunned teammates. "Simulation complete," announced the system. "Warbot neutralized. Kalen." Unit 73, and Vaurak stared in disbelief as Amare climbed down. Her movements controlled despite the visible burns and lacerations on her arms. "How?" began Vaurak, his warrior's pride visibly shaken. "That was..." Kalen seemed unable to finish his sentence. Unit 73's analysis was more direct. The probability of a single humanoid disabling a Class 3 warbot through physical means is calculated at 0.0047%. This outcome requires recalibration of my understanding. Amare simply retrieved her discarded boots, wincing slightly as the synthetic skin on her fingers made contact with the material. "On Cantria," she said quietly, "we learn to use what we have. Sometimes, that's all you need." What none of them realized was that the Academy's monitoring systems had captured everything, every movement, every impossible feat of strength and endurance. By evening meal, the footage would spread throughout the campus network. By the next morning, the previously unknown Deathworlder student would become the most discussed topic in the entire Interstellar Peace Academy. "Did you see it? The Cantrian girl lifted the warbot's armor panel like it was made of paper. I heard she punched through reinforced titanium alloy with her bare hand. My cousin works in medical. Says her bone density is triple standard human baseline." The whispers followed Amare through the academy corridors the next day. Some students moved aside as she passed, eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and fear. Others watched with newfound respect or scientific curiosity. In the dining hall, she found herself sitting alone until Unit 73 approached, setting its nutrient container beside her tray. "Your performance exceeds all previously calculated parameters," the robot stated, its voice modulated to approximate conversational tones. "I request data regarding Cantrian physiology to update my knowledge base." Amare smiled slightly. "It's not just physiology. It's adaptation and training. Cantria doesn't forgive mistakes, so we learn not to make them. Yet you appear structurally fragile compared to species like the Volcran." "Appearances can be deceiving," she replied. "That's something most non-humans don't understand about us." Before Unit 73 could respond, a shadow fell across the table. Commander Gellius stood there, accompanied by two Academy officials Amare didn't recognize. "Student Fletcher," the commander said, his 4 eyes fixed intently on her. "The Academy Board requests your presence. Immediately." Amare felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dining hall's temperature. She had expected some reaction to yesterday's simulation, but not this level of official attention. "Of course, Commander," she replied, rising from her seat. As she followed the officials through corridors she hadn't yet explored, Amare's mind raced through possibilities. Expulsion, special recognition, medical examination. The Academy's stance toward Deathworlders had always been ambiguous, officially welcoming, but practically wary. They led her to a chamber deep within the administrative section. Inside, 5 senior officials sat behind a curved table, their species representing the founding members of the Galactic Alliance. At the center was Director Thal, whose species, the Vihari, had been instrumental in forming the Alliance after centuries of interstellar conflict. "Amare Fletcher of Cantria," Director Thal began, her voice melodious despite the serious tone. "Yesterday's simulation has raised significant questions regarding your capabilities and the potential implications." Amare stood straight, hands clasped behind her back in the formal posture taught to all Academy students. "I completed the assigned task, Director. You demonstrated physical capabilities well beyond what your application indicated," countered Administrator Jex, the Rilgorian representative, whose insectoid features remained unreadable. "This constitutes a security concern. I disclosed my Cantrian heritage fully in my application," Amare replied evenly. "All physiological data was provided to Academy medical staff upon enrollment. Data which, apparently, failed to capture the true extent of your abilities," said Commander Gellius. "The question before us is whether students with your adaptations can safely participate in standard training protocols without endangering others." Amare felt her chest tighten. This was exactly what she had feared since childhood, that no matter how carefully she controlled her strength, no matter how she tried to fit in, other species would always see humans, especially Deathworlders, as a threat to be contained rather than allies to be embraced. "I have never harmed another student," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Nor do I intend to." "Intention is not the issue," Director Thal replied. "Capability is. The board has decided you will be reassigned to a specialized training program more suited to your unique abilities." "You mean isolation," Amare said, the words escaping before she could stop them. A moment of uncomfortable silence followed. "We prefer to call it appropriate placement," Administrator Jex stated. "You will receive one-on-one instruction with specialists in xenobiology and tactical applications. Your interactions with general student population will be monitored for everyone's safety." The message was clear. She wasn't being expelled, but she was being separated, studied, contained. "When does this reassignment begin?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral despite the anger and disappointment churning inside her. "Immediately," Director Thal answered. "Your personal effects are being transferred to new quarters in Section 17B. Commander Gellius will escort you there now." As Amare turned to leave, Director Thal added, This isn't punishment. Student Fletcher, the Alliance must understand the full capabilities of all member species. Your cooperation helps build that understanding. Amare wanted to argue that understanding shouldn't require isolation, that trust wasn't built through surveillance. Instead, she simply nodded and followed Commander Gellius from the chamber. Her new quarters were larger, but sterile, lacking the communal atmosphere of the student dormitories. The walls were reinforced, the furnishings more durable, designed for someone they considered dangerous. When the commander left, Amare sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of what had happened. She had come to the academy to prove that humans, even those from extreme worlds like Cantria, could contribute positively to the Alliance. Instead, she had inadvertently reinforced their fears. Her communication pad chimed, interrupting her thoughts. A message appeared, not from Academy officials as she expected, but from Kalen Thriss. Team 7 still requires your tactical input for tomorrow's simulation, it read. Unless Deathworlders fear academic challenges as much as they relish physical ones? Despite everything, Amare found herself smiling. The message wasn't exactly friendly, but it was an acknowledgement, a refusal to let her disappear into isolation. Perhaps not everyone shared the board's perspective after all. She began to compose a reply when her mind drifted back to Cantria, to the lessons her parents had instilled in her from earliest childhood. The memory came vividly. 6-year-old Amare, standing at the edge of the howling forest, her small hand gripping her father's weathered fingers. Why do the other colonists look at us differently when we visit the trading post? She had asked. Watching the massive thunderheads gather on the horizon, a daily occurrence in Cantria's volatile atmosphere. Her father knelt beside her, his face lined with scars earned through years of survival. Because they don't understand what makes us strong, he explained. They see our muscles, our reflexes, our endurance, and they think that's all we are. They miss what truly matters. What's that? Young Amare had asked. That we use our strength to protect, not dominate. That we've learned to bend without breaking. He pointed to the tall, flexible trees that somehow withstood Cantria's hurricane-force winds. See how they move with the storm? That's us, little one. The galaxy fears what it doesn't understand. But someday, they'll learn that the harshest worlds forge the kindest hearts. That night, their home had been hit by one of Cantria's infamous flash floods. Amare watched as her father lifted impossible weights to free trapped neighbors, as her mother performed emergency surgery by lamplight when power failed. Not once did they hesitate. Not once did they use their abilities for anything but helping others. This is what it means to be from Cantria, her mother had told her afterward, bandaging a deep gash on her own arm as if it were a minor inconvenience. We are strong, so others don't have to be. Remember that when you go out among the stars? The memory faded, leaving Amare sitting in her sterile new quarters, hand hovering over the communication pad. Her parents had prepared her for this, for the fear, the isolation, the misunderstanding. They had also shown her how to respond, not with anger, not with resentment, but with steady, unwavering strength of character that matched her physical capabilities. She finished her reply to Kalen. I'll be there. Tactical challenges are just puzzles with higher stakes. On Cantria, we solve puzzles daily, just to survive breakfast. As she sent the message, alarms suddenly blared throughout the academy. Red emergency lighting activated, and the station-wide announcement system engaged. Security breach in progress. All students return to quarters immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Amare's training kicked in instantly. She moved to the door, only to find it automatically locked, part of the containment protocol for her special quarters. The monitoring panel showed chaos in the corridors outside. Students running, security personnel mobilizing, and flashes of weapons fire. Through the Academy-wide emergency channel, fragmented reports came through. Unknown vessels, forced docking, armed intruders, biological agents detected. Amare assessed her options rapidly. The reinforced door that was meant to keep her contained now prevented her from helping. She could break through. The materials, while stronger than standard, weren't designed to withstand Cantrian strength at full exertion, but doing so would confirm the board's fears about her being uncontrollable. Before she could decide, her personal communication pad activated with an incoming transmission on the emergency frequency reserved for Team 7. "Fletcher!" Kalen's voice was strained, background noise suggesting he was in motion. "Are you receiving?" "I'm here," she replied. "Locked in my new quarters." "What's happening?" "Anti-Alliance extremists," he explained rapidly. "They've deployed modified warbots and some kind of biological weapon that affects non-humans. They're targeting the data core. If they access it, they'll have information on every Alliance world's defenses." Amare processed this. "Where are you now?" "Section 14. With Unit 73 and Vaurak. We're trying to reach the emergency defense systems, but the corridors between us and the control center are crawling with hostiles." "What about Academy security?" "Overwhelmed. The attack was too coordinated, too sudden." There was a pause. Then Kalen continued, his aristocratic voice showing rare uncertainty. "Fletcher, Amare, we need your help." The choice crystallized for her in that moment. Breaking out meant defying direct orders, confirming the worst fears about Deathworlders being uncontrollable. Staying meant safety for herself, but potentially devastating consequences for the Academy and, by extension, the Alliance. No choice at all, really. "Stand by," she told Kalen. Then she approached the reinforced door, placed her hands at the seam where it met the frame, and exerted pressure. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protesting metal, the door began to bend outward. Amare increased the pressure, feeling her muscles strain against Cantria's evolutionary gifts. The locking mechanism snapped with a sharp crack, and the door lurched open just wide enough for her to slip through. The corridor outside was in disarray, emergency lighting casting everything in crimson shadows. Distant sounds of combat echoed through the station. Amare oriented herself quickly. Section 14 was 2 levels down and half a kilometer across the Academy's central hub. She moved with purpose, her bare feet silent against the floor plating. The standard-issue Academy uniform restricted her movement, so she tore the sleeves at the shoulders, freeing her arms for the climbing and combat she anticipated. 3 corridors later, she encountered the first signs of the invaders, 2 modified warbots, similar to the training model but equipped with actual weapons, guarding an intersection. They were positioned to prevent movement toward the central hub, their sensors sweeping methodically. Amare ducked into a maintenance alcove. Analyzing the situation, direct confrontation would be detected immediately, alerting others to her position. Instead, she accessed a nearby maintenance panel, using knowledge from her technical training to override the local environmental controls. Seconds later, coolant vapor flooded the corridor, dense enough to interfere with the warbot's thermal imaging. As they adjusted their sensors, Amare moved, not toward them, but above them, using exposed ceiling conduits to traverse the intersection undetected. Once past, she accelerated to a full sprint, covering ground at a pace impossible for most humanoid species. She reached the central hub in minutes, finding it transformed into a battleground. Academy security forces had established a defensive perimeter, but they were clearly losing ground to the superior numbers and weaponry of the attackers. Amare's communication pad chimed again. "Fletcher, where are you?" Kalen demanded. "Central hub," she replied, ducking behind a fallen support beam as weapons fire lanced overhead. Heavy resistance between here and Section 14. We've found another route, he informed her. Maintenance shaft 7C connects directly to the data core control room. We're heading there now, but we'll need backup. Sending coordinates, added Unit 73's precise voice. Probability of successful infiltration, 27. 3% with current team composition. And with me? Amare asked, already moving toward the nearest access point for the station's maintenance network. There was a pause before Unit 73 responded. Recalculated probability, 58.9%. Significant improvement, though still unfavorable. I'll take those odds, she said, forcing open an access hatch and slipping into the narrow maintenance tunnel. See you there. The maintenance network was a cramped labyrinth of conduits, power lines, and support structures. For someone of average build, navigating it would have been challenging. For Amare, with her compact frame and Cantrian strength, it was ideal, allowing rapid movement while avoiding the main confrontations. She reached the designated coordinates in record time, emerging from an overhead access panel to find Kalen, Unit 73, and Vaurak huddled behind makeshift barricades. The corridor beyond was littered with the remains of security drones, evidence of their attempt to push forward. You made it, Kalen said, a new note of respect in his voice. The control room is 30 meters ahead, but they've established a defensive position we can't break through. 2 warbots and at least 4 organic combatants. Amare assessed the situation. What about the biological agent they've deployed? Airborne pathogen, Unit 73 explained. Targets non-human respiratory systems. I am unaffected due to my synthetic components, but Kalen and Vaurak have received preventative countermeasures from medical supplies. And me. Human physiology appears naturally resistant, the robot stated. Another Deathworld adaptation. Perhaps. Vaurak growled softly. So what's the plan? We can't stay here forever, and every minute we delay gives them more time to breach the data core. Amare studied the corridor layout, the position of the enemies, the available resources. Then, she outlined a strategy so audacious that even Vaurak's warrior culture would have considered it recklessly brave. You're insane, Kalen said when she finished. That's suicide. Only if I fail, Amare replied with a grim smile. And Cantrians don't fail easily. Before anyone could object further, she began implementing her plan. Unit 73 would use its technical capabilities to temporarily disable the corridor's lighting. Vaurak and Kalen would provide covering fire from their position, aiming to distract rather than eliminate. And Amare would do what Deathworlders did best, the impossible. The lights went out on Unit 73's signal. In the sudden darkness, Amare was already moving, sprinting directly toward the enemy position. Weapons fire illuminated the corridor in strobing flashes as Kalen and Vaurak executed their part, forcing the defenders to duck behind cover. The warbots, however, needed no light to target. Their sensors locked onto Amare's approaching form, weapon systems orienting to eliminate the threat. She didn't slow down, didn't evade. Instead, she accelerated, pushing her Cantrian muscles to their limits. The first warbot fired, its targeting algorithms calculating her movement perfectly. Or it would have, if she were moving at normal human speeds. The energy blast scorched the wall behind her as she altered her trajectory with reflexes honed by years of dodging Cantrian predators. 3 meters from the defensive position, Amare launched herself into the air, using a protruding wall fixture as a springboard. She sailed over the first warbot entirely, landing behind the defensive line in a controlled roll that brought her directly to her feet. The organic attackers, masked humanoids of unknown species, reacted with shock, clearly unprepared for a frontal assault to actually succeed. Amare moved among them with efficient precision, disabling rather than killing, using pressure points and joint locks that worked across most bipedal anatomies. The second warbot pivoted to engage her. But now, she had the advantage of close quarters. Before it could bring its weapons to bear, she had slipped beneath its guard, grasped its leg assembly, and with a surge of Cantrian strength, toppled the 3-meter machine onto its side. The corridor lights flickered back to life, revealing Amare standing amid unconscious attackers and disabled machines. She waved her team forward. "Clear! Move to the control room!" They rushed forward, Valrak's eyes wide with newfound respect. Kalen, shaking his head in disbelief, and Unit 73 visibly recalculating its understanding of human capabilities. The control room door was sealed, but the access panel remained operational. Unit 73 interfaced with it, bypassing security measures in seconds. Alert! Additional hostiles detected inside. Estimated 6 combatants plus 1, Class 5 warbot. Class 5. The designation sent a chill through Amare. Unlike the training models, or even the modified units they had encountered, a Class 5 warbot was designed for full military engagement, capable of withstanding orbital bombardment and equipped with enough firepower to level small settlements. "Can we call for reinforcements?" Valrak asked, checking his weapons charge. Kalen shook his head. "Communications are still jammed throughout this section. We're on our own." Amare studied the schematics Unit 73 had pulled up. The data core itself is shielded, but the attackers are trying to access it through the main console. If they succeed, they'll have download capabilities. "Then we stop them," Valrak stated simply, his warrior's resolve evident. "Yes," Amare agreed. "But we need to be smart about this. A frontal assault against a Class 5 is suicide, even for me." She outlined a new plan, utilizing the room's architecture and their diverse capabilities. Unit 73 would create a system distraction by triggering false alarms throughout the station. Kalen, with his natural Zarinthian affinity for electronics, would attempt to lock down the data core access from a secondary terminal. Valrak would engage the organic combatants, where his natural armor gave him advantage, and Amare would deal with the warbot. When the door slid open, chaos erupted exactly as planned. Alarms blared from every console as Unit 73's electronic warfare flooded the systems. The attackers, caught by surprise, divided their attention between the new threats and their original objective. The Class 5 warbot, however, remained focused on its primary directive: protect the attackers until they completed their mission. It immediately identified Amare as the most significant threat and moved to intercept. The machine was massive, nearly 4 meters tall, with reinforced armor plating and multiple weapon systems. It fired a warning burst that Amare barely dodged, the energy weapons leaving scorched trails across the floor where she had stood moments before. 15 seconds until I can access the lockdown protocols," Kalen transmitted through their team comm. "Need more time." Amare didn't respond verbally. She was already in motion, circling the warbot, keeping its attention fixed firmly on her while her teammates executed their parts of the plan. Unlike the training models, this machine's combat AI was fully optimized. It predicted her movements, cut off escape routes, and steadily backed her into a corner of the control room. She needed to get closer, to find a vulnerability in its construction. But each approach was met with devastating counterattacks that forced her back. Behind the warbot, she saw Valrak engaging 3 attackers simultaneously. His natural combat abilities impressive, but clearly strained. Kalen had reached the secondary terminal, but was taking fire from 2 directions. Unit 73 was physically interfacing with the main system, its processes visibly struggling against advanced countermeasures. They were losing. In that moment, Amare made a decision born from the harsh lessons of Cantria. Sometimes, survival required sacrifice. She charged directly at the warbot, abandoning defense entirely. The machine, programmed to capitalize on enemy mistakes, focused all weapon systems on the approaching target. Energy blasts tore through her uniform, searing flesh beneath. Impact projectiles struck with bruising force. Pain exploded across her consciousness. But Cantrian physiology, evolved to withstand crushing pressure and extreme trauma, kept her moving forward. The warbot, calculating her approach speed against the damage inflicted, determined she would be neutralized before reaching striking distance. It was a logical conclusion, based on known human limitations. But the machine hadn't been programmed with data on Deathworlders. Amare reached the warbot bloodied and burned, her uniform in tatters, but still functional. Before it could adjust its combat protocols, she had ducked beneath its primary weapons array and grasped its lower support structure with both hands. "What are you doing?" Vaurak shouted, momentarily distracted from his own battle. Amare didn't answer. Every ounce of her concentration focused on the task at hand, lifting a machine designed to withstand battlefield conditions, weighing over a metric ton, off the ground. On any standard world, it would have been impossible. Even with Cantrian physiology, it pushed the absolute limits of what her body could endure. Bones creaked, muscles tore, tendons threatened to snap under the strain. But she continued to lift. The warbot, suddenly finding itself off balance, attempted to compensate by activating stabilizing thrusters. The sudden burst of energy singed Amare's already injured arms. But she maintained her grip, leveraging the machine's own movement to continue the lift. With a final, desperate surge of strength, she hoisted the massive warbot over her head, just high enough that its center of gravity shifted beyond recovery. Then, with a controlled pivot, she directed its fall directly onto the main control console, where the attackers had been attempting to breach the data core. The impact was catastrophic. The console shattered under the warbot's weight, electrical systems shorting out in spectacular fashion. The machine itself, internal gyroscopes disrupted by the maneuver, struggled to right itself amidst the wreckage. "Now!" Amare gasped through the comm. "Kalen, execute lockdown!" Through pain-blurred vision, she saw the Zorinthian's fingers, flying across the secondary terminal. "Lockdown protocols engaged! Data core secure!" The remaining attackers, seeing their primary objective neutralized and their main defensive asset disabled, began a fighting retreat toward the exit. Vaurak moved to pursue, but Amare called him back. "Let them go," she managed, her voice weak as the adrenaline began to fade, allowing the full extent of her injuries to register. "Security will intercept them." Mission accomplished. She attempted to stand straight, to maintain the composure expected of an academy student, but her body had reached its limits. As darkness encroached on her vision, the last thing Amare saw was the astonished faces of her teammates as she collapsed beside the defeated warbot, a smile of grim satisfaction on her bloodied face. Consciousness returned gradually, filtering through layers of medically induced sedation. Amare became aware first of the distinctive hum of regeneration equipment, then the antiseptic smell of the Academy's medical facility. When she finally opened her eyes, she found herself surrounded by monitoring devices, synthetic skin grafts covering much of her visible body. A quick internal assessment confirmed what the equipment suggested. She had sustained significant damage. "The patient is conscious," announced a medical droid, its sensors detecting her changed vital signs. Alerting medical staff and authorized visitors. Minutes later, the room filled with familiar faces. Kalen, Unit 73, and Vaurak entered first, followed by Commander Gelius and, surprisingly, Director Thal herself. "How long?" Amare asked, her voice rough from disuse. 3 standard days," replied the medical droid. "Extensive reconstruction was required for your right arm and thoracic region. Cybernetic augmentation was necessary to restore full functionality." Amare glanced down, noticing for the first time that her right arm from the elbow down had been replaced with an advanced prosthetic. The synthetic material mimicked human skin, but the underlying structure was clearly mechanical. The damage was too extensive for conventional regeneration, explained Commander Gellius, noting her gaze. Even Cantrian healing capabilities have limits. Director Thal stepped forward. Student Fletcher, your actions during the attack were extraordinary. You defied containment protocols, engaged in unauthorized combat, and destroyed Academy property. She paused, her expression unreadable. You also saved the lives of countless students and preserved critical Alliance security information. Amare waited, unsure whether punishment or commendation would follow. The board has reviewed the incident extensively, the director continued. Your teammates provided testimony regarding your tactical leadership and selfless actions. She gestured to Kalen, Unit 73, and Vaurak, who stood together with a new unity. We have been forced to reconsider certain assumptions regarding Deathworlders. What she means, interrupted Kalen with uncharacteristic informality, is that they're scrapping the isolation program. You're being reinstated to regular classes, with Team 7. Vaurak nodded, his crimson scales rippling with what Amare had learned was a sign of respect in Volcron culture. You fight well, for a human. Unit 73 added its own assessment. Analysis indicates optimal team composition includes your participation. Request permanent assignment to Team 7. Amare looked from one to another, then back to Director Thal. Is this true? The director inclined her head slightly. The Academy exists to prepare the next generation of Alliance leaders, those who will ensure peace and cooperation across species lines. We would be remiss in our duty if we failed to recognize qualities that contribute to that mission, regardless of their origin. Commander Gellius added, your training will be modified to accommodate your unique abilities, not to contain them, but to develop them as an asset. Amare felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief, vindication, pride, but also a lingering sadness for the mistrust that had necessitated such dramatic proof of her intentions. Thank you, she said simply. When can I return to training? The medical droid intervened. Complete recovery requires an additional 7 days of monitored rehabilitation. The prosthetic integration must be properly calibrated. 5 days, Amare countered with a small smile. Cantrian recovery rates. The droid's processors whirred as it calculated new parameters. Acceptable, given physiological factors. As the others filed out, Kalen lingered behind. The Xerinthian's typical aristocratic aloofness had been replaced by something more contemplative. Why did you do it? He asked quietly. You could have remained safely in containment. The odds of success were minimal. The personal risk was extreme. Amare considered the question, thinking back to the lessons of Cantria, to her parents' examples of strength used to protect rather than dominate. Because that's what humans do, she finally answered, especially those of us from Deathworlds. We evolved to survive impossible conditions, but we choose to use that strength for something more than just survival. Kalen seemed to absorb this, his bioluminescent patterns shifting in thought. The Alliance has always feared what humans might become if they turned their adaptations toward aggression rather than cooperation. That fear isn't entirely misplaced, Amare admitted. Our history has dark chapters, as does every species. But what makes us valuable to the Alliance isn't just our physical capabilities. It's our capacity to choose protection over power. Every time. The Xerinthian nodded slowly. I believe I am beginning to understand. Rest well, Fletcher. Team 7 awaits your return. After he left, Amare examined her new prosthetic arm, testing its responsiveness, feeling the integration of machine and flesh. Another adaptation. Another way to survive and continue. It seemed fitting somehow, a physical representation of the bridge between human resilience and Alliance technology. As she drifted back into healing sleep, her thoughts returned to Cantria, to the howling winds and crushing gravity that had shaped her people into something the galaxy both feared and needed. Perhaps this incident would help the Alliance understand that the very qualities that made Deathworlders dangerous also made them essential allies in a universe filled with unpredictable threats. 3 months later, Amare stood at the podium in the Academy's Great Hall, now restored after the attack. Before her sat the assembled students, faculty, and Alliance representatives gathered for the remembrance and reconstruction ceremony. Her prosthetic arm, no longer concealed, gleamed in the ceremonial lighting, a reminder of both loss and renewal. At Director Thal's request, she had been asked to speak on behalf of the student body. "The attack on our academy was intended to divide us," she began, her voice steady and clear. "To exploit fears, to turn differences into weaknesses. Instead, it revealed our greatest strength, our diversity." Her gaze moved across the audience, finding familiar faces. Kalen. His aristocratic features now softened with genuine friendship. Unit 73, whose programming had evolved to incorporate concepts of loyalty and trust. Vaurak, who had become an unexpected advocate for human integration and tactical training. "I stand before you not just as a human, not just as a Deathworlder, but as a member of Team 7, a microcosm of what the Alliance itself aspires to be. Different species, different capabilities, united by common purpose." She lifted her prosthetic arm, letting the light catch its surface. "This represents what we all carry after the attack. Scars, changes, adaptations. But it also represents the truth I learned on Cantria, that strength isn't measured by what you can destroy, but by what you choose to protect." A murmur of approval rippled through the assembly. "To those who still fear what humans might become, I offer not reassurance but a challenge. Don't fear our strength. Fear the day we no longer use it to protect you." The silence that followed was profound, thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. Then, beginning with Vaurak and spreading throughout the hall, applause built to a thunderous crescendo. As Amare stepped down from the podium, Director Thal approached her. Provocative words. "Student Fletcher." Honest ones. "Director." The Vahari studied her with ancient eyes that had witnessed centuries of interspecies, conflict, and cooperation. "A delegation from the Alliance Council has requested your participation in a special forum on Deathworld integration. They were most impressed by the footage of your actions during the attack." Amare raised an eyebrow. "Are they looking for reassurance or confirmation of their fears?" "Perhaps both," the director replied. The question one council member posed was quite telling. "Are humans our greatest allies, or the greatest threat we've consistently underestimated?" "And what answer did you give?" Director Thal's expression shifted to what Amare had learned was the Vahari equivalent of a smile. "I suggested they were asking the wrong question. The true question is not what humans are capable of, but what they choose to do with those capabilities. History suggests that underestimating either would be a profound mistake." As the director moved away to greet other dignitaries, Amare rejoined her team. Around them, the Academy continued its mission, bringing together diverse species, teaching them to see beyond differences, preparing them for a future where cooperation meant survival. It wasn't perfect. Prejudices remained, fears lingered, mistakes would be made. But standing among friends who had once been skeptics, Amare felt something her parents had described long ago on the storm-swept plains of Cantria. Hope that transcended evolutionary differences. The galaxy would always contain threats, challenges that required strength to overcome. And when those moments came, perhaps they would remember the Deathworlder girl who lifted a warbot over her head, not to demonstrate power, but to protect what mattered most.